So hello, thanks everyone again for joining. It's great to see you. We've got a bit of another kind of informal office hours this week. We thought that we'd go over briefly the news that's from ourselves, things that have been happening with the Academy internally. But then we thought we'd have a kind of an informal chat or discussion about some of the editors that we use. And we'd also love to hear comments from anybody outside of Canonical if they're brave enough to share their kind of editor with us, or how they found ways of working best with documentation. Obviously, it doesn't have to be Ubuntu, it doesn't have to be Linux. It could even be Word. So please jump in if you've got any comments to make. Just to start off with, one thing that we have done, I put it on the forum last week, created a list of things that we thought might be good things to cover in this documentation office hours in no particular order. If there's anything in that list you'd like to see us do or prioritize, please let us know. If there's anything you'd like added to that list, let us know. Internally, we've created a kind of, we've used Jira. I've demoed Jira in this way before to be able to pick up these cards and hopefully get a bit better organized and more planned, so that we can share with you ahead of the office hours what subjects we're going to cover. And that may also involve shuffling the time of the office hours to better accommodate the people who are going to do the demos. As I just said, for this one, we thought that before I do the demo thing, this is something that I needed to address from last week, the demo that I did on the Sphinx starter pack. There are a couple of things that, having spoken to Ruth this morning, and Ruth is the person really who's put the whole starter pack together. I think she watched in some anguish as I kind of butchered the update process when we added the file and it wasn't immediately added to the index. I was going to briefly demo, actually. She made a good point that we should have explained what had actually gone on. And what had actually gone on was that the cache doesn't automatically get cleared when it's constantly building, when you make run. So you have to do make HTML or make clean and then make run again to be able to clear the cache. And then for the new files that we added, we did one file, the test.md, for that to be added to the navigation on the side. I was going to demo it, but it's probably not actually worth it. I'll switch to the screen because just to remind you, if you don't remember Ubuntu share. Actually, so this is actually the state that I left it in last week. I just did make run in the starter pack directory, which is built the documentation and then hosting it at this local host address. Sorry, that's my emacs setup. I refresh here. It did have the test document that we worked on, and what we actually tried to do was include a new doc in the contents, and it wasn't automatically added. If I can spell test, save that, then add it to the index file. Test2, and then what I was just trying to say is that when that's done, this doesn't automatically get updated in the navigation here when I open it on the left. What we actually have to do is quit from the make run process, make clean, make run again, and that's clean the cache and then rebuilding the docs, which only really happens when you add things to the navigation. Ruth will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I think there must be some other thing going wrong at the moment, actually. Oh, you don't have a title in test2. That's the issue right now.
Oh, I thought I put a... Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah, so maybe just to clarify what is going on or what was going on last time. by default, Sphinx will only build files that have changed. So at the time when you add a new file and you add it to the index page changes because you do something to it. You add the file there. But if you're looking at another file, like for example the README, that one has not changed, so it's not built again. So that's why you need to do a clean build to actually see the output.
Thank you. I'm sorry for messing it up. So it's all working now, and so I think if you're ever in doubt, a make clean and then make build is a good way to work with the starter pack. I'll quit that. So going on to like the main kind of demo part of what we thought we'd cover, we have got a more in-depth idea of looking at the editing environments we use, because I guess a lot of us have got strong opinions on that, and we didn't really want to go into too much depth in this office hours, but just to kind of give you an overview of the environments that a few of us use, and also it would be great to hear your thoughts on the documentation that editors you use. I think you've probably seen from some of my demos that I use the editor called Vim. In fact, this isn't my main machine, as I'm just running it in a VM. My main machine is this one. And there's a lot. I think another time we'll go into Vim properly. There's an awful lot in Vim that I don't necessarily want to cover, but you can see that I've kind of augmented my Vim with the normal at the bottom here. It's using Powerline to create all these graphics. If this was in a Git, I don't know which one to do now. I go into one of my snaps. You can see that the branch that I'm working in Git is reflected here in Vim as well, and you can use plugins in Vim to kind of manage that automatically. I think the thing that most people like about Vim is the navigation. I'm not a power user, but I know the commands for adding to the end of the line. If you see it, the cursor at the very top here, if I just isolate the name, you can do Shift and A to go to the end of a line and add. You do insert to start typing, and then you do escape to move to command mode. When you're in command mode, you can press colon. If you see at the very bottom there, it is complicated, I must admit, but it's got great help text. It's one of the best things about Vim. The way that I use it is I use it as a wiki. I'm trying to invoke the wiki with a keyboard shortcut that is on a different keyboard, which isn't working. The problem is that I'm not using my normal keyboard. I can't remember what the shortcuts are, but I can show you the sorry. So one of the great things is automatic completion of commands. When you type them at the bottom, you can do tab just like you can. I use a load of plugins that are installed via Vundle, which is the plugin manager for Vim, so you can augment it with lots of different things. This, for example, is showing Markdown. It's highlighting Markdown files. It helps you a lot when you're working with Markdown in ways that Vim doesn't automatically do, sometimes with just its syntax highlighting. Is the spell checking working? The spell checking working. That's another plugin that's installed. It highlights the words that are wrong in red. Yeah, I don't really want to go too much into there's so much to do. You can split the view. This is the split view is really useful if I find like, so the Snapcraft docs have a huge API file. It's in the reference section. If I edit this in Vim, one of the best things you can do, one of the best functions I've found for the split view is there's many editors now have like a modal mode editor where you can have multiple cursors. With Vim, if I'm editing this is the API document. Often I'll be adding things to the title here at the top, but with a split view, if I split the view, I can move down and then edit the fields for a reference in the command line and quickly switch between the two panels, so that you can edit in multiple cursors basically with a split view. But I used SP for that. If I followed that by a file name, I'd be able to load a completely different file, so you can work with two files at once without having to do two tmux sessions. Just to choose one other thing that I really like Vim for is it's search and replace. You can basically type in regular expressions to search and replace text. I don't know if I'm brave enough to do it. This is actually a live document, so I won't do it. But its search and replace syntax is very powerful, and you can create very good conditions for things. I find that absolutely essential on working with large documents. But if you're interested in how that works, we'll perhaps cover Vim and Emacs in more detail in a different time. But this is generally my default editor. Is there anyone else who'd like to share their kind of thoughts on their editing environment? Oh yeah, and I do have wobbly windows. I'm such a eye candy KDE user. And go for it, Robert. Do you want to share your screen or say something?
I unfortunately cannot share my screen because I just broke my Wayland setup, and Wayland is not going to allow me to share my screen through Google Meet. But no, I just wanted to comment on that and to sort of follow up on what you were talking about when you were demoing the different text editors some time back. And of course, you showed Vim, just as you did today, but you also did show Kate, which is my editor of choice. And it's a funny choice because it's like a really, really old editor. Of course, not as old as Vim or Emacs, but it started out as a very simplistic editing environment for the KDE desktop. And it has evolved a lot, but I still use just probably a very small subset of its functions. Its features are pretty broad at this point. It has an entire debugging environment. It can be, of course, extended with plugins and extensions. It has a project management function. It integrates with Git. It has its own file browser and stuff like that, which some of these things I use, some of them I don't, but there are a couple that I would want to highlight, and one is really a silly feature that I absolutely love, and that is a visual scroll bar. It's something that is a feature of KDE or the Plasma desktop, and it's based on the Qt GUI framework. And what it is basically a scroll bar that is of customizable width. And if you extend it to, I don't know, 5 or 7 times the width of a regular scroll bar, it shows you a minimal view, or like a thumbnail view of the entire document. So you can actually jump around, and it's such a silly little feature. I'm sorry that I cannot demo it right now because, as I said, I can share the screen. but I have become totally dependent on it because it's such a big helper. For example, I use Vim for writing my emails because it's just simple, and I don't need this kind of stuff. But for editing large documents, having that visual scroll bar is something that's absolutely fantastic, and it is a true image of the document, including syntax highlighting. So it is very easy to get oriented where you are in the document and to jump around based on that. So that's one feature that I absolutely adore. And a second one, there are a ton of other features. That, it has tabs just like many other graphical editors, and so forth. And you can configure your own shortcuts. And funnily enough, I also use. Oh yeah, there you're showing it now.
Yeah.
The visual scroll bar. Yeah. And if you could use, is that an HTML document?
It's marked now, but it's because I've not saved it. Hold on.
If you could save it and show syntax highlighting, then it's actually going to, or you can just choose syntax highlighting. Yeah. And then you can see that it actually does the syntax highlighting even in the scroll bar.
Oh yeah, that's very nice here on the right.
Yeah, and as you hover, it actually shows you, what you're hovering above, which is, I use it all the time. I've just become so used to that little feature. Anyway, and another thing that I like very much is that it is fully scriptable, just like Vim and other editors, of course. But it uses a flavor of JavaScript that you can use to extend the functionality in any way that you wish. It can be customized in in various ways. You can just create something that would in other editors perhaps be called macros, but it's a full-featured JavaScript variant that can be used, and with it you can access, and it has access to the editor's API, so you can work with artifacts such as the position of the cursor, the elements of the text, meaning like what line you're on, or what is the content of the document, and so forth. So I have created a ton of scripts for myself that I have tied to my own keyboard shortcuts that do all kinds of things, like for example, for a restructured text, I find it a bit of a pain to create headings, because they need to be, the line of the title needs to be underlined using a special character depending on what the level of the heading is. And so I created a bunch of very simple scripts that just basically do this automatically for me. I position my cursor over the intended heading, and I press a shortcut based on what level of heading I want, let's say level 2, and it automatically underlines that line with the requisite number of the special characters and stuff like that. There's tons to be done more, and it's really powerful, and it's something that I really like. And I suppose that it's the kind of inertia that gets me from or prevents me from starting to use another editor in earnest, because I have this huge library of scripts that I would need to migrate at some point. Well, I probably wouldn't need to, but would want to, because I have become so used to them. So anyway, yeah, I wanted to share that as a sort of an extension of your last demo. And yeah, by the way, it does have a Vim or V compatible input mode, so you can use Kate as Vim, basically, so that it has a command and editing mode, and you switch between those. And I don't use it very often because I don't know, I just have not gotten used to it, but it works pretty well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a great editor, Kate. I think I got, I was go back to the wiki that I was trying to show. I've just worked out this is VimWiki, which I think might be, someone will have to correct me. It's a bit like how some people use org mode in Emacs, and basically by pressing this // and then W, I've got this built-in wiki into Vim, which I use all the time. If you look at the bottom there, I use it synced with the Git repo, and these are just simple markdown files, but I can get to them at any time. So you can see I've got meeting notes and all the things to do with the Academy, and I can always get to that from within Vim. Yeah. Is there anybody else who would like to maybe talk a little bit about their preferred editor or editing environment?
Graham, I might jump in.
Hey, go for it, Shane. Thanks.
So I'm trying to remember back, like, how I made these decisions originally all those years ago, and I mostly use Vim, or a version of Vim called neovim, which is a kind of modified version of Vim with some additional functionality and some different design choices. But I started with VSCode, and I think VSCode is a really great editor. But I think what happened was I was working on a very large LaTeX file. I'm not sure if people are familiar with LaTeX, but it's a very old style of markup for rendering documents. It's very popular in academia and for writing technical articles. And VS Code was fantastic, but when I was working on this really large file, it just became incredibly slow, and it drove me crazy. And I heard that I could use Vim and it would be faster. And since then, I've used Vim a lot, and I've found it really excellent for, I guess, a workflow where you want to move between your terminal and your editing environment really quickly. So I might be able to share my screen. Graham, would that be possible?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to try and see if I could get it to work. Go for it.
How do I do this? Entire screen 1. Okay, does that look okay?
It looks great.
So like, basically what I'm talking about is I'm in my terminal, and I can run certain commands like I can in my terminal, which I'm often doing to create files and to move files and to copy files. But then I want to, open up a file in my editing environment, and I can do this very quickly with Vim and neovim. And I don't know why, maybe it's a personal thing, but at some point, the speed at which this happens became very important when you're editing a lot of documents. So NV here is just an alias I have for neovim. And if we look at this for a second, it opens pretty quickly. But if I use Vim, which is, I don't have any plugins installed in Vim, it's just a vanilla version of Vim, that opens almost instantly, which is fantastic. If I use VS Code using code, that this has taken a really long time, and
Loading Electron.
yeah, that's taken a really long time. And it's fine if you're maybe opening up one session and you're going to be working on it for a whole day, but if you're rapidly moving between files and things like that, this can get quite frustrating. So for my particular workflow, I just really like the snappiness of Vim and neovim. And like people have already been saying, there's so many things you can do. Like if we have some sort of sequence of words, I can hold Control-V and then press Shift-I, and then I can add something at the start of all of those sentences. And we can do these things really quickly. And one of the things I like to emphasize when I'm talking about neovim and Vim, even though I started by talking about speed, I like to kind of move away from that, because the reason I use it isn't just efficiency, it's also fun. there's so many different key commands that do these really powerful things, and I don't know most of them. And I feel like I'm always discovering new cool things that just make work faster and more fun. Some of the so I've created a file here. If I create another file, test2md, and then if I open both of them, there's a nice fuzzy finder that a lot of people that use neovim typically use. So this, I just pressed space, and now I can see the two files that I opened, and I can switch between them real nice and quick. And if you've got many files and many different directories, this is a really efficient way of moving between them. The last thing I'll say, because maybe I missed something. I wasn't sure that I didn't know that we were going to be talking about this, and it's probably a good thing because I probably would have talked too long. But I just want to say that if I open up my if I look for some applications here, you know, I've got Visual Studio Code here. I have IntelliJ. If you look at the bottom of my screen, you'll see an Emacs icon. So I like all editors. I think a lot of these editors have really cool features, and there's certain things they do especially well. I use Emacs for note taking because org mode is unbelievable, and although things like VimWiki exist, I just think org mode is still at a higher level. If I ever needed to do something like a Jupyter notebook, I'd probably use VSCode. If I ever have to do Java programming, I'm probably going to use IntelliJ. Like, they all have their different strengths, but my go-to is the terminal-based editors like Vim and neovim. But I'm always looking at the other ones to see what they do differently. And like Robert has already indicated, you know, you can use Vim mode on lots of different editors. But if VSCode comes out with a really cool plugin tomorrow, you're probably going to see the neovim developers out there probably trying to come up with some version of that too. So it's really, I think of it like an ecosystem of editors all inspiring each other, and it's good to keep an awareness of what all these different tools are up to. So I might leave it at that.
Thanks, Shane. You're absolutely right about the fun element about it. It's, even though it's not practical, when you know, if I think it's something like Control A that will increment a number in Vim, and it's so great to be able to use that, even though you could just type in another number. Or is it tilde that moves something from lowercase to uppercase? Mm-hmm. It's all like a game.
And just one thing I'd add, because it was very important for me at the start, which is, and everyone's different, I get very visually distracted when I'm working. So if I'm working on some documentation, there's lots of technical concepts, things I'm trying to understand. Like, the last thing I want to see is just, you know, 24 different icons in my eyeline. So with something like VS Code, there's lots of icons and visual noise, and I find it very distracting. Whereas it's something like Vim or neovim, you just tend to be able to focus on the text, and I really like that kind of minimal aesthetic of it also. Yeah,
and another thing I like, and this isn't exclusive to Vim, but when you've learned those commands, you know, such as the $ prompt for the end of the line or whatever you happen to be using, when you come to like write those expressions for changing things or creating macros, you already know the language to write these things, and they appear in the configuration files with exactly the same syntax so that you can reuse them and you don't have to relearn them. That's another big part of it that I enjoy. Thanks, Shane. Does anyone else, maybe the last one, if anybody wants to share some of their thoughts on this? No pressure.
Everyone seems to be talking about VS Code, but telling about the bad things about it. I use it. Maybe I could quickly show that most of the things that y'all like, they're actually there. So
yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Although, just give me 1 sec.
Yeah, VS Codium's cool, the open source build of VS Code.
Although I'm not really an expert and I don't really use most of the extensions, I was just looking at some of them right now. So, okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, so the first thing that if you are working with a lot of files, you do see all the files here. You don't have to, you can just switch between them in the index here. We do have, similar to what Robert said, if there is a view on the right, which you can use the small view, which scrolls through a long text. There are usual easy shortcuts for finding and replacing, and it's if you come from a Windows background, probably these things are the standard shortcuts. And there are things like things like if autocomplete is quite useful. Usually it's useful more when you're coding. I mean, if you have like JavaScript and things, it actually gives you the exact functions and the function, the definition of the function, the parameters and everything. We don't really need that, but even for simple documentation here, it does help in terms of these suggestions. And it supports all sorts of different, it has its own syntax highlighting for all the different types of files that you might use. Also, it has a huge list of extensions, which I have never really used. So GitHub Copilot, or even, well, a lot of stuff which I haven't really used and I don't really use, but would probably make sense. So if you want to check your GitHub actions in here, you can have your terminal in here. It pretty much does a lot of things. And maybe I should actually check out all the different things that it does and counter most of your points. But yeah, that's about it.
I think, as you might expect, I think the GitHub integration is very good in VS Code. And we were talking about this earlier on. I found it very useful for Arduino development if you don't particularly get on with the Arduino tools that they provide. Yeah, it is a great editor. A lot of people seem to be using it now.
Yeah, and I just want to say it is a great editor. So that's what I started with, and I still have it installed because I still find it really useful for certain things. And like, I think with most of these editors we're talking about, a lot of the functionality that we really enjoy with a specific editor can be found or can be integrated into another editor. It's just like, for example, Vim integration. You can get the Vim key bindings as a plugin in VS Code, but it doesn't fully replicate what Vim does. So some of the things you mentioned, Graham, there, I can't remember specific examples. Like the plugin does not fully recreate that, but it might be enough for the majority of people if that's what they want. So as I said, I'm kind of I'm open to all editors potentially. I think they all offer really great things. I think it can be a mistake sometimes. For example, if someone is saying to themselves, I want to get started writing some documentation, and then they get really buried in the problem of which editor am I going to use. And if you go online, you're going to find some really strong opinions. And I think the most important thing is just to try one and see if you like it. If you don't like it, try something else.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a very good point. As much as we're talking about the editors, we could have spent half an hour actually writing some documentation.
And it's notable that within Emacs, you have like 7 different variations of packages that will let you use VI commands and edit as if in VI. There is no Emacs mode in Vim. So that probably tells you which one is the better editor.
Well, Vim is a subset of Emacs.
Actually, so a long time ago, 1989 Uniform, I was part of a panel on stage that was debating VI versus Emacs when it was really young. And my conclusion, which wasn't very popular with my fellow Emacsers, was Vim is a better editor, no doubt about it. Emacs is kind of, it does all kinds of things. Editing is just one of its skills, but it's not a specific special purpose targeted editor. It is a very standard old-fashioned editor with a lot of other stuff. So I concede that Vim is a better editor.
I think we need to get that in writing and you to sign that off for us.
You just recorded it. Come on.
Well, thanks everyone. That was a lot of fun, actually. I didn't want to get too seriously into the Emacs versus Vim debate, but it's almost impossible, isn't it? Maybe we can return to that, you know, as a Christmas special or something. But yeah, I'll stop the recording now.